Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. When a new product lands on my desk, as much as I'm really eager to do a nice picture with it, what I have to do is I have to remind myself I need to understand what the product does, because that will really help in my final piece of work. So Walnut ink, Tom Norton has developed this ink called Walnut ink. It's not made from walnuts. Traditionally the colour was, but it wasn't, it used to fade. So this is light fast and acid free, so a really nice drawing tool. So what I'm going to do is, first thing I do is I gather lots of pieces of paper and different tools just to see how it may work. First thing, watercolour paper. The ink is rewettable even once dry, so suitable for a watercolour kind of image. So let's see how it works on watercolour paper. Works really nice. You can get some nice marks, clean lines, as well as nice tonal values. I gather lots of different pieces of paper together. This is Chinese paper, so it's a very absorbent paper. Because it's an ink, I just wanted to see how you could do Chinese brush with this. And you can see with this paper, you have to be really quick putting your mark on because it bleeds. And this is the skill of learning how much ink to put on your paper. But it works really nice. You've got some lovely colours with this walnut ink. Traditional cartridge paper. Now, not unexpected because it's a ink that you can draw with a pen, you can use a brush. So this is normally what I would have chosen to draw on. But this is why I do testing and just try it out on different pieces of paper. So you have little scraps of paper, maybe you've cut down an image, just write on what they are and use them for testing because it's really invaluable. And I found this because I have a piece of Bristol board, the Frisk Bristol board, which is a really, really smooth paper. I don't usually use it because I find it's very smooth for a lot of the techniques I'm doing. Doesn't mean it's a bad paper, it's just, for me, it's not something I would go to or even normally choose. But as I was doing lots of tests, I thought I'd have a look and see how it worked on this, and I was really pleasantly surprised. I was really excited about the marks you can make and the values you can get. So it's always useful to do these tests because you'll surprise yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'll do a short demonstration using the walnut ink, and I'll explain some of the properties while I'm doing the demonstration. Now the subject I've chosen to do is a walnut. I know, very cliche, but to be honest, it's got wonderful tonal values and lovely patterns within the nut. So very cliche subject, just the walnut. I've cropped down the original photograph because I don't have a huge amount of time. And what I did find was, as much as I thought I'd paint very quickly, you actually really do start to look at detail with this kind of work. So alongside the walnut ink, which is the lovely sepia colour, Tom Norton's brought out this drawing tool. So it has a sponge soft end, which holds plenty of ink, and a nib at this end. So you can do a lot of different marks with this tool. And I'm going to try and do most of the drawing with it. I may pick up a dip pen when I just want a little bit finer detail. Water soluble, sorry. So even when it's gone on, I can manipulate and move. Depending on the paper, it's not so easy to move on the cartridge paper or the Bristol board, but on watercolour paper, due to its sizing, you are able to manipulate a little bit more. That's again why you do the testing. So I'm just adding water to create a very soft tone. The key to this is going to be layering, and you will see that just gentle layering will start to build up the form. So I'm just going to add some colour into the walnut, starting at the bottom. The reason is this is the darkest area, but what I want to really concentrate on and think about is keeping some light areas. I don't want to just do a solid block, and I'm using the tool to create patterns. I mean, The walnut is a lovely organic shape. It's got texture. It's not as smooth. And so you can use the tool just to create those textures. I always like either a paint or a tool that does most of the work for you, and that's always a bonus. So nice, soft, just sponging in where I feel I need some colour, and I'm just being quite careful to leave a little bit of light areas, because you'll see how useful they are when I come back at a later date. Now this paper, great for dry medium. With wet medium, I did find it dries very quickly, and layering, there comes a lot of scrubbing into it. It does tend to take the surface off. But if you're careful and you're not over wetting or really pushing the ink around, then it's absolutely fine. And it's again a good exercise of how much to do and how little to do. So now just going in with a little bit darker tone. Again, I'm starting at the bottom, just because for me that's how I remember that it's where my darks are. And I'm just looking at another layer. What I'm trying very carefully not to do is lose some of that tonal values I've already put down. So. And at the moment it looks a bit of a mess. It doesn't look quite like a walnut, but you'll see it will start to come together as I start to build up the layers. It's dark under here. Just reminding myself where the darker areas are. Go back here because it looks like the light is coming that way, so under here is quite dark. But it won't be fully dark or really coloured in. It will still have a little bit of light because of the ridges around the walnut. Thinking about some of the shapes. And again, I'm just blocking out. I'm not overly worrying about, maybe I've lost some of the pencil lines underneath because I've still got the image in front of me. Not a walnut, as long as I finish it and it looks like a walnut, it doesn't matter that there might have been a crease in one area which you've not drawn, or a lot of this is just using the tool to build up. So a little bit darker here, a little bit flatter. Okay, so that is 2 tones, well 3, because you've got your light areas, your mid and a darker area. I'm just using the nib end just to add a little bit more structure and a little bit of detail, because you do have some much sharper lines in the walnut. Now what I have found is, though you can create a number of tonal values, the really dark tone is actually quite difficult to achieve with just the walnut ink. Depends how dark you like to go. I like to really add dark tones, but that is easily solved because there is a darkening medium, so you can either use it on its own or add to the ink, and that will really take you up to a much darker tone, and I'll use that a little later. So for me, I like really instant darks, and you don't always get that with this, but more practice, more learning about how it works for me, I will find the best way of working with it. What I'm doing is I'm just reviewing the tones each time I make a mark, and this is always a good exercise, because as much as people think they observe the subject, they really don't always look at it as much as they think they do. So just creating some of these, this line here. You can see just not getting the dark tones. For me, it's not as instant, but like I say, it's a good exercise in being patient and actually working with a much softer medium. I can visualise this being used for wonderful landscapes, those sepia drawings that you get from the old masters. You know, you can replicate that kind of work. Portraits, wonderful portraits, just using this lovely sepia colour. And it may be better on a different paper. You'll probably get really different results. But you can see how those tonal values are really starting to come together. And for me, this is really quite a slow way of working, but it's a good exercise. It's taking me out of my comfort zone a little bit more than normal, but I always, excuse me, I always tell people, try something new. And it is really scary trying something new. And it's, you know, it's difficult because you have high expectations of what you want to achieve. And, you know, even professional artists or people who've been working with a medium for a long time, you know, they have to learn new mediums and different mediums just the same as everyone else. Quite like that. Quite like those tones. Let's work into here. Maybe it'd be easier if it was in a deeper pot. I can dip the pen in and load up. What I'm trying to do is make sure this hole is full of ink, because it holds the ink, excuse me, like a reservoir and allows it to drain down. Okay, that's nice. Okay, so work around here. Really wet. So what I think I'll do is I will just build up these tones on this side, and then we'll have a short break, and then I'll go in, add some darkening medium, and then I can start to build up the shape, and you'll see how it comes together much quicker, because I know I will overwork and I'll keep putting too many tonal values in, and it'll just end up as one muddy colour, whereas at the moment it's got some lovely different tones. Okay, just using the pen to create texture. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. At the moment it looks like a, you know, still no big values, but when we come back after the break, I can then show you how you can really add the darker tones.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA is here to inform, encourage and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing of being a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I could shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
Hello and welcome back. So while you've been on a break, I've had a chance to look and review, and I think I want to now go into using the darkening medium. So same sepia tone but much darker. I'm just going to add it to the corner here. You probably don't need as much on the palette as I have, but my hand slipped, if you want to know. So now I'm just going to use, and like I say, a deeper receptacle is probably better because I can dip the pen as the pen suggests. I'm just going to go straight in using the darkening medium, and from the beginning you'll start to see how dark this can now take the tones up. So you can see there how wonderful dark you can just add that tone, which I feel you're missing just with the walnut ink. But that's the way I work. I like to have really strong darks and lights. So now I can start to bring out some of these lovely shapes and textures and bring out a little bit darker. And this will now draw all those tones you've put down together and draw them into a little bit more of a coherent shape and hopefully look like a walnut. I'm just using quite a fine pen because I like the texture you can get. You don't create a good solid line, you can make really quite textured lines. Just move it around. And you'll see I'm having to keep dipping into the the ink, because you need to keep loading the nib with ink. So really dark, there's a dark band across here. Go very dark up here. Got to stop. Sorry, my nose is running and everything. What do we do now? Oh yeah, okay. I was trying not to, but it was running down my face. Okay. Where was I here? So we're now just starting, and you can see here, a lot of the time, it's not until it's dried you can actually see how the tones are working. And this is, again, a good reason to walk away, because once it's dried, it really does bring in it dries and settles, and then you can start to work. And I'm just thinking about here, it's really dark. I want to bring out the texture and the shape and the darkness under here. You can see how you can use a pen to create this lovely texture in the knot. It's not smooth at all. Just use your pen to do this. Right, so here, right down the middle, where the two halves meet. And a little bit of darkness up here. So the light's coming from here, but you will still have some darkness in some of the ridges. What I'm going to concentrate on is just making sure I've got the darkest darks I can at the bottom. So here, see that area of the walnut here is quite dark. Just making sure I'm adding that. Then I can add some of the finer shapes. And actually what's nice is when the ink starts to run out of your pen, it gets a lot lighter. What I'm going to do, I shouldn't really do this, I'm just dipping my pen in because I just want to bring some of this colour I've put on here, but it's a bit too dark. So I just want to soften it by adding some water. So you can see how you can play. As long as I make sure I dry my nib, it should be absolutely fine. So see how that's really kind of softened that very dark ink. So, and I'm working down the bottom. I still think it needs to definitely have a little bit more darkness just to show. So I'm going to go in to the darkening medium with a different tool, because I'm just scratching around. Okay, so just darkening this side will just really add to its shape. I'm being really careful and really thinking about it, not to overdo and lose some of the lovely light values. But it just means I'm going round in circles a little bit. So I'm just being brave now, just making a conscious effort to bring out the form into the ink, and let's bring out some detail. What I'm going to do is not have as much detail on this side, and then it will look a little bit more structure. Too much detail on here, so again I'm going to dip my pen in. These lines are they're not soft enough not to go with the whole of the nut. So you can see actually there's quite a lot of work just in a walnut. It's a round shape, but there's so much more detail you can add or leave off. It's totally up to you how much detail you want to go into. Normally, I'm not a hugely detailed person, but I'm enjoying this whole process and learning a lot from it. Looking at, again, dipping in because that isn't. So looking at the original, this is quite dark, and then there's a shadow here, but it's not as dark. So I'm just adding water just to take down that tone. So I'm constantly reviewing the tonal values. Just need to work up here. So I'm going back with the stick. Again into the darker sepia darkening medium, just to add a few more touches. And I'm saying a few more touches because I want to stop working. What I want to just do is now with the walnut ink, just bring out some of this detail, not using the darker, and just bring it in, make sure it finishes as a whole. But I don't want the intense. So you can see some of these broken lines here. I think if I'd used the darkening medium, it's too dark. Would have been too strong, especially up here. Let me just have a look here. This needs a little bit of work. And you can see just by reviewing and working back over a piece how you can start to bring it together where it looks a little bit off. Here didn't quite work, but just making sure all the pieces fit together. And I can see there, need to possibly work darkening medium. Just darken there, do a little bit more structure. I'm probably working a little too much. But I know when it dries, it will be very different to how I'm leaving it. I'm just making sure I finish off these darkest areas here because they are what is holding the nut together. So it's telling a story of the shape of this subject. Not the whole story, but enough that you will recognise. So not quite finished because at the moment it's floating in midair. So I'm just going to make sure that I add a shadow just to finish off. Doesn't matter if you're not doing a background, but a shadow is really important, and make sure it touches. And even when I'm doing a shadow isn't one tonal value, it's a number of tonal values. I'm just blotting off. Bit of tissue, too much ink, and then I can soften. And the darkest area going to be a bit wet, so it's probably going to bleed, is here. I'm just going to make sure I really show that this is sitting on a surface. Just use the texture, use the pen, the nib. It's difficult in the light. I can't always see. It's why I'm tipping back and forth, because I can't always see the tones as well as you may see them, because the light's it's blinding a little bit. Okay, I'm going to keep working too much. So you can see how layering is really important in using the walnut ink. So try it out. Find out for yourself the best way of working. And above all, have fun. So join me next week for later in the week for another live demonstration.